So I think something that really stands out is the willingness of people to open up and share their story with you and share their story with Serene. Was that easy? Did you find people wanted to share on camera, or did it take you a while?
Well, I always have a saying as a filmmaker: you can't tell a story with people who don't want to tell their story. And so, I think it really helped. We were an Indigenous team. We were an all-Indigenous crew. We engaged in ceremony. We had consultation with the elders. We didn't just show up with their cameras ablazing like so many people did after us. But we showed up and we had dialogue before we ever even turned a camera on, and I think that was really important, and that's what sort of prompted the relationships and the reason why you can see the things you see on there. And I made real conscious choices, like in the first film when you see Bobby Jean there and she's talking about her history with sexual violence, like we're not on her face for a reason, and I showed her that scene before it came out in the film, and I said, are you okay with this? And she asked me to take something out, and I did, but she said, no, I want everything else in. But those are the choices you have as a power of a filmmaker, and those are really important choices, because it was enough to me that she gave her story. We didn't need to be on her face. We didn't need to be staring into her eyes as she cried. There's a dignity that you can offer in your choices as a filmmaker, and I think that's the kind of trust. You make a pact with each other as a filmmaker and as a subject, and that's what allows a film to really be elevated, that kind of trust and that ethical responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, the stories people share are so powerful that it's incredible. The themes, the ideas, everything in this is so complex. It's about land, it's about water, it's about Indigenous sovereignty, but it's also about women. For me, it stands out. And it's about this strong alliance of women that emerges over the course of the year that you're following them. Was that something intentional when you went in, or is it something that sort of emerged? And
well, it's interesting. You're the first person to ask me that, which is always very surprising. I'm a woman, and so I think I make films about things that I'm angry about. I make films that I feel need things that I want to explore, and the reality is there's not enough female filmmakers, but when you have a female filmmaker, it's just like an Indigenous filmmaker or people telling a story. When you're Indigenous and you're telling stories about our own people, you tell it from the inside out, and you tell another perspective, and we have to rewrite these narratives. And so, the women were leading this fight, but they were quietly leading it. A lot of the Standing Rock footage you'll see the warriors standing out and like, I'm the warrior, but there were women warriors that were leading in a very different kind of way, and I wanted to show that. And I think that relationship to the violence against the earth and the violence against women was something that no one had ever really fully explained. And with Winona LaDuke and Jazz Dillon, who's a great scholar at the New School in New York, who's written a lot about this, I really wanted to highlight that because it felt important, and it also felt like a responsibility as a female filmmaker to voice that. So,
yeah. So I'd love to open it up to your questions for Michelle. I'm sure there's a lot to process. What's happening now?
Yes. Well, you guys voted in Trump. God damn it. Well, Trump took office.
Not these folks.
No. It's San Francisco. We say California will be its own country. Don't worry. 4 days after he took office, he signed that executive order, and the pipeline construction advanced. The Bureau of Indian Affairs, even though LaDonna Bravewell's land is private land, the way that it works on reservation land is that the Supreme Court, as soon as settlers set foot on American land, there was a Supreme Court decision that said that the government, basically the state, will override all other jurisdiction of the land. So basically, even though that's been in that land has been in her land in her family for generations, and it's essentially private land, the Bureau of Indian Affairs came in and ordered everyone off the land. They raided the land, and the reason, the legality that they're allowed to do that is because they say they don't believe the land is being used in favor of the people, in the best interest of the people. So again, you have the state making choices for the native people whose land, who've been stewards of the land for thousands of years. And so the camp is disbanded. Many of those people have either gone home, a lot of healing had to happen, there was a lot of post-traumatic stress, there was a lot of state violence that happened, and I'm happy to get into that if you have questions. And a lot of water protectors disbanded and went to other occupation camps that you're going to hear about this summer, because they're banding up and they're organizing. And that was the great thing about Standing Rock, is it started a larger conversation between tribes and allies to basically have a larger resistance movement, not just in Standing Rock, but across America and Canada.
Will you be continuing to follow this story? Will there be a third part?
You know, from a total personal point of view, it took a lot out of me to do this. It took 1.5 years of my life, and it was really difficult. We lived in the camp, and you know, it's tough. I never, you know, I'm very, very privileged. I grew up in Canada. I didn't grow up in a refugee camp or, you know, in a place where it was unsettled in that way. And yet here we are living in a place where there's helicopters 24 hours a day going over. You're stopped at military checkpoints. My car was searched more than once. You know, you basically, your friends are being, like with a camera, that was our weapon. So we were really targeted, you know? My friends were charged with felony offenses who'd never had criminal records in their lives, like, you know, strip search, all sorts of violations. And it takes a lot out of you to live in a place like that for a long period of time. So the short answer is I will continue this kind of work, but I don't, right now, I'm adapting a book called The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King, but that will be an animation. So I will continue in this vein, but in terms of going back into an occupation camp right now, I think I just need a little resting and recuperating.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Rise series that you've been working on Viceland and some of the other stories that have come up?
So it's an 8-part, 1-hour documentary series for Viceland. A lot of the stories are North American based, but we also went to Brazil, we went to Hawaii. We looked at resistance in different forms. A lot of it was environmental, indigenous people rising up against corporations that are basically extraction, so oil and gas, mining, that kind of thing. But there were other resistance stories, like we had a militant hip hop group that basically drives around Northern California and goes into really, really hard communities to work with the kids to help them voice their experience and empower themselves. We also followed some MMA, mixed martial arts fighters who are Navajo, who are using their traditional teachings to inform their athletic practice. So, you know, this series kind of is a breath of like what resistance looks like in our communities. And as far as I know, it's the first time it's ever been done, so by an Indigenous team, so it was really exciting.
For work that was made for small screen, I mean, it's incredible. It's a really beautiful film. So, and they all are. I've seen some of the other episodes, and you should check them out. When can we see them? Yeah, on Viceland, it's a subscription-based cable provider, but they've also put a lot of material streaming online for free because we really fought hard to make sure that underserviced communities could see the work. So, yeah, check that out if you like what you saw. Yeah. Other questions for Michelle? No questions?
Can I ask why you didn't say anything about the water hoses being
the water hose, yeah,
and being freezing cold weather?
Yeah.
Did you assume everybody knew that?
No, I actually had it in there, and I just didn't like. No, sorry, I didn't have it in the second one. We actually had no one really comment on that out of the interviews. Those interviews that you saw were done before the water stuff happened. So we were working with context from our interviews, so we wouldn't have narration. And you know, to be honest with you, I guess I figured most people would know that, but if you don't know that, those water cannons were used in like sub-zero freezing temperatures, so there were a lot of hypothermic cases, and it was, and then the state, the military, the state, the police tried to say that they weren't aiming them at civilians, they were just using them to keep civilians back. But there's since been a lot of footage that has gone on to the courts to show that they were actually directly aiming water cannons at people, and we can prove that. So one of the things I just want to add is that, like, yes, you see what we have in this film, but I spent a lot of time in the camp also recording human rights abuses, and those are classified recordings that are going to go on to support like human rights trials. There was United Nations observers and Amnesty International observers on the ground for most of, while the conflict intensified, and some of the videoing that I did were basically testimonies that are going to be used in human rights cases. So. Another thing that we became aware of at that time was that filmmakers were being arrested
for filming some of these protests in North Dakota and being charged with federal felonies, facing up to 45 years maximum prison sentence for doing their job as journalists in documenting what was happening there. So it's so vital that we continue to support the work of filmmakers that are showing us what's going on.
Like what we're seeing now, what was really interesting about that is that people were being arrested after the fact. So they would look at Facebook live feeds or they would look at video and they would say, we can prove you were there because we have this video showing that. And so people started to take down their live feeds, but the live feeds really they were sending drones and scrambling the system so you couldn't get the live feeds out, all sorts of things. And it was really, but the live feeds were integral to showing the world what was happening in Standing Rock. Facebook was a huge part of that movement. I can't stress it enough. Facebook was massive in this movement. And so there was that, but then also the fact of being a filmmaker and really being targeted, because we were targeted. They would like come and grab us if they saw us with a camera and just pull us out or try and confiscate our footage. And it was very meditated, like premeditated, you know, and it was a really unique position to be in as a filmmaker. And also you're always trying to like juggle like showing the story, but also not putting people at risk, you know?
Yeah, and we have to make sure it's not a shadow of things to come with all the fights that lie ahead.
Oh, it totally is a shadow of things to come. Because totally. Because like Oklahoma's changing its laws. Like they're actually preemptively changing their laws because they know the pipelines are being built. So the state is changing the laws before the protesters get there to give higher federal offenses to It's actually getting, Oklahoma's leading it in a lot of things. North Dakota's pretty bad too. Like they changed the drone law while we were there, which allowed them to have armed drones in the skies. And that law was changed as we were there because of Standing Rock. So it's absolutely like going to get worse under this administration. Mark my words.
So what can we do? Like
what can we do?
You guys here in this room?
You guys can do lots of stuff. One thing is you can contact that's the beauty of a democracy. You can contact your leaders, phone, letters. But the thing is I also feel like even if you don't think they're on side, even if you know they're not, keep them accountable. Have the press asking questions. Keep them accountable. You know, we have to have better press, like things like Democracy Now! That show another side of something, of an issue. You know, you can divest your money. Divestment campaign is doing well. Billions and billions were divested from the Nordic nations, like Sweden, Switzerland, Norway. They took a bunch of money out. Take your money out of Wells Fargo. Take your money out and put it into credit unions and tell them why. Say, I don't agree with your unethical human rights abuses with how you're spending my money. So take it out and divest it in funds and stocks that are ethical and don't have the kinds of human rights abuses that we're seeing all over the world with these extraction companies.
Questions from the audience for Michelle? One way at the back.
It was been said that the water cannons were laced with hazardous chemicals. Has that been confirmed or denied?
It hasn't been confirmed yet, but there was a public health warning. In terms of the water cannons, I don't know that that's actually been proven yet, although there are those rumors. But there was a public health warning out. There was something called the no dapple cough that was happening, and we had elders coming from all the way from New Orleans and that making cough syrup for people. And the public health warning was issued maybe like 4 months ago now, 3 months ago, and they said anyone who has this persistent cough needs to come in because there were planes flying overhead at crop spraying in October, and we were all like, why are they crop spraying? The harvest has already happened. And they said, oh, they're just crop spraying, but now there's an investigation going on in that people were shown to have been exposed to high levels of rat poisoning, and they're actually doing hair follicle samples. They're testing the tops of tents to be able to prove that it came from the top down, and there's thoughts that chemical warfare was used on the protesters, but that has yet to be proven, but it's definitely being investigated. This is the United States on our own people. Like, I know I'm just like stating the obvious, but it's absolutely, you know, we talk about Syria, we had a movie here before about Ethiopia, but this is happening here. Like, we have privilege, we have money, we can do something about this. Instead of just being complacent and like, I don't know, languishing in our privilege, you know? And it just makes me so mad.
questions. Yes.
Sorry, except that we don't really have control over our laws anymore now in the new administration. So you mentioned Earth Justice was one of the legal groups helping. Are there any other real legal groups actually getting people out of those federal charges, etc.?
Well, there's been a real issue that in North Dakota, they did something really horrible. They didn't allow, they passed a law during Standing Rock to basically keep lawyers from out of state coming in to defend these felony charges for water protectors. And they basically, and then they overturned that and said, okay, you can come in and be a lawyer, but you have to work pro bono. So you can't pay your lawyer. So that kind of deterred people too. So there is definitely a need for human rights lawyers and criminal defense lawyers, that kind of thing. But there are other avenues to be educated. Honor the Earth is doing some great work. The Indigenous Environmental Network that Dallas Goldtooth you saw in there, and Candy Mossett, they're there. They were on the ground the entire time. Greenpeace also had their Indigenous team there doing direct action training. So there are definitely places where you can help support what's going on.
I think we have time for 2 more. Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
What's the reaction of the North Dakota non-Indian local or state population to what you're portraying?
I would.
Have you shown the film around North Dakota?
Yeah, the film's been like all sort of like aired nationally now. I mean, I haven't personally. I've shown it in Standing Rock, but I haven't personally shown it around because that's. To be honest, I haven't been invited there. I've been invited lots of other places, but not North Dakota, funny. But I think it's very mixed. There's a lot of allies that supported what was happening on the ground, but there was also a lot of vigilante kind of attitudes. And we did see, like in one instance, you might have read about this in the news, but like one person who worked for Dakota Access Pipeline, he just like decided to come into the camp with guns a-blazing and shooting, and basically people mobbed him and like basically disarmed him. But I mean, this is the kind of thing that we were really worried about. It wasn't really even the police. We were like more worried that it was just going to be these vigilantes that come in and start sort of taking the law in their own hands. And I mean, we're seeing that in Arizona with the border. It's not that crazy to think that farmers or other construction workers could do that. I have video of a man pistol whipping a woman out of his truck. And just, so these are the kinds of things that were very real. So I would say that the reaction to answer your question has been mixed.
More question? Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you for showing a lot of the history behind it and going through what happened in 1800s and then going through AIM as well. I think it's really important to understand where it all came from and that it's history repeating itself, and hopefully the difference being that it has been nonviolent. And so I just wanted to thank you in general for going over that.
Thank you so much. It was really important to me, like as I started hearing the history, like LaDonna and my good friend Nick, we spent many times around the fire just talking about, like, he helped stop the Keystone the first time. So fortunately, he'll probably have to help stop it the second time. But we sat around that fire and talked, and as I heard the history of the nation and the land, I just thought, we can't tell this story and not have that context. I think it's a real missed opportunity to not talk about that context. So I really appreciate that you like that.
Yeah.
And your archival footage is incredible. Was it easy to find that? Or
No, it was hell to find the archival, because the thing is, I didn't have a budget for it, so I had to find all these cheap ways to get archival footage. And to be honest, I love Black civil rights movies, I'm Not Your Negro, and these movies that have come out, and I've always watched them with envy and thought, why do we not have that kind of footage in our community? And then as I started going through, I realized, oh my God, we have all this footage, just no one's ever done anything with it. And it's a very empowering, amazing thing. And so when I make The Inconvenient Indian, which is the book by Thomas King, it's gonna be a mix of animation and archival, and we'll have much more of a budget. So I hope that we'll be able to use more of what we were able to find, because there's some incredible stuff out there.
I also just want to add that if any schools would show this, high schoolers or anything like that.
Yeah, there's been a
This is the
huge
stuff
interest
that
from universities. I'm
needs
showing it
to be
in
shown.
NYU and the New School and USC, and all these amazing universities have invited me to show the films, but we haven't shown it to too many high schools. But the National Film Board of Canada is actually talking with us about potentially coming up with a study guide, which I think would be really, really great for high school students. Yeah.
question from, yes.
Yes, I think the fellow who was doing security talked about the policy of no firearms, drugs, and alcohol. And was that a known policy, or how did actually that
Yeah.
come out? And did everybody know that? And
Yeah, so when you entered the camp, there was a series of protocols. So you couldn't enter the camp without moving through security. And it was be very clear at that point, no drugs, no alcohol, no firearms. And I watched many people get kicked out of the camp for that. Now, I can't say there wasn't infractions, I don't know, but I definitely know that that was not something, and you know, like, I enjoy my glass of wine every now and then, and you could go to the casino up the road and have a glass of wine, but people just, I found, just generally didn't, because, I mean, there's always some, but I found that, like, you know, there was a camaraderie and a respect for one another that was just like this accountability that Mark Tilson talks about in the film that was incredibly empowering. You know, it was really something. But the other thing that we would do, just to give you a sense, is you'd go to the legal tent and you'd have to write, if you were going to be on the front lines, you'd have to fill out a form that would give like your kin. Do you want to be bailed out right away? Do you not? You'd be given the name of or the number of a lawyer, and you'd write it in a Sharpie on your arm or on your leg, and you would go through the process of what it would mean to be arrested and what are your rights in that kind of situation. So there was a lot of accountability and responsibility. It wasn't like, we're at a camp, we're all just gonna eat and powwow. Like, it wasn't like that. We were on the front lines in a war zone, and there was a lot of beauty within that, but also a lot of responsibility.
Just to wrap us up, is there, in this whole experience, and is there anything that gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, everything gives me hope. Yeah, totally. I mean, the young people give me hope. Yeah, the young people, they're incredible. We have amazing young people. I mean, they're like so gifted with, like, you know, we have in the Anishinaabe culture, we have something we call the 7th generation, and we believe that the 7th generation is rising, and you know, we are coming out of a time of trauma. Like, there was a time when I was growing up where all Native kids had someone in their family that went to residential school, or someone who had been abused. But those generations, like, we're getting further and further from that trauma, and healing, you know, and strength comes with that. So I have a lot of hope in that. Yeah, a lot of hope in that, and I have a lot of hope in our own ability to rise. Like, and even if that just means waking up every morning and being a good mom, or, you know, helping someone in a way that maybe is like, we have this saying, like, you have to speak for those that are the most vulnerable, and so that includes our non-human relatives. And so when I see laws like what happened in Brazil and New Zealand, where they granted legal status to a river, like, that's where we need to be going. So I have a lot of hope.
Well, thank you for these beautiful and honest films.